The Harrison family car crunched along the snow-covered driveway. Their new home loomed before them, a Victorian mansion with a shadow hanging over its gables. 10-year-old Emily shivered, clutching her teddy bear tighter. "It's a bit creepy, huh, Dad?" 12-year-old Josh tried to sound brave, but his voice wavered. Mr. Harrison chuckled, patting his son's shoulder. "Just needs a little Christmas cheer, that's all." He winked at his wife, but she seemed lost in thought, her gaze fixed on the attic window. As they unloaded boxes, the setting sun cast long, eerie shadows across the snow. Emily felt a cold draft despite the closed door. The house seemed to be watching them, its windows like vacant eyes. The next day, while unpacking in the attic, Emily stumbled upon a dusty old chest tucked under the eaves. The attic was dimly lit, with only a single bulb casting eerie shadows on the walls. Dust particles floated in the air, illuminated by the faint light, giving the space an almost magical feel. It was crafted of dark wood, its surface intricately carved with patterns that seemed to tell a story of their own. The craftsmanship was exquisite, each detail meticulously etched into the wood, hinting at the chest's age and the care taken in its creation. A tarnished brass lock held it shut, but what sent chills down her spine was the label plastered across the top, "Do not open." The label was old and faded, yet the warning was clear. It was as if the chest itself was guarding a secret, one that had been hidden away for generations. Her heart pounded with curiosity. She knew she shouldn't, but the lure of the forbidden was too strong. The more she stared at the chest, the more she felt an inexplicable urge to uncover its contents. It was as if the chest was calling out to her, whispering secrets of the past. She found an old key on a ring nearby, and with trembling hands she managed to force the lock open. The key was rusty and worn, fitting perfectly into the lock as if it had been waiting for this moment. Her hands shook with a mix of fear and excitement as she turned the key. The musty smell of aged wood wafted up as the chest creaked open. The sound echoed through the attic, adding to the sense of mystery. The air was thick with anticipation as the lid slowly lifted, revealing the treasures within. Inside, nestled in faded velvet, lay a collection of antique Christmas ornaments. The velvet lining was worn and frayed, but it still held the ornaments securely, as if protecting them from the passage of time. They were unlike any Emily had ever seen, delicately painted faces on porcelain dolls, intricately carved wooden toys, each one a masterpiece in its own right. The dolls' faces were so lifelike it was as if they could come to life at any moment. And a brass bell with a strange, alluring inscription. The bell was small but heavy, its surface covered in mysterious symbols that seemed to glow in the dim light. Emily couldn't decipher the inscription, but she felt a strange connection to it, as if it held the key to the chest's secrets. That night, the Harrisons decorated their Christmas tree with the ornaments from the attic. The air was filled with laughter and the soft glow of twinkling lights. Each ornament held a memory, a story from Christmases past. As Emily hung the brass bell, a chill ran down her spine. It was an old family heirloom passed down through generations, and it always seemed to carry a mysterious aura. She could have sworn she heard a faint whisper, a mournful sigh. The sound was so soft it was almost imperceptible, but it sent shivers through her nonetheless. Later that night, a series of strange events began. The house, which had been warm and inviting, now felt cold and unwelcoming. A cold draft seemed to blow through the house, extinguishing candles and setting the ornaments swaying. The temperature dropped suddenly, and the once cozy living room felt like a forgotten tomb. Then the brass bell began to ring, a low, resonant tone that seemed to vibrate through the very foundation of the house. It was as if the bell was calling out to something or someone from beyond. As the family gathered in the living room, their faces pale with apprehension, a chorus of voices began to rise from outside. The sound was haunting, filling the air with an eerie melody. It was Christmas carols, but sung in a slow, mournful tone, the voices raspy and ethereal. The familiar tunes were twisted into something almost unrecognizable, sending chills down their spines. Peeking through the window, Emily saw ghostly figures, their forms shimmering in the falling snow. They moved slowly, almost as if they were floating, their faces obscured by the darkness. The Harrisons knew this was no ordinary Christmas night. Terrified, the Harrisons huddled together as the ghostly caroling continued. Desperate for answers, Mr. Harrison decided to consult the town's oldest resident, a woman known only as Old Maggie. Maggie, her eyes clouded with age but sharp with wisdom, listened intently to their tale. "That house," she croaked, "holds a dark secret. A family once lived there, full of joy and Christmas spirit. But tragedy struck one Christmas Eve when their young daughter died in a tragic accident. The family, driven mad with grief, turned to dark magic to try and bring her back. They believed they could trap her spirit in the house, using the ornaments as vessels." Old Maggie continued, her voice a trembling whisper. "But the magic went terribly wrong. Instead of their daughter, they summoned something dark and sinister. It twisted their love, their grief, into a curse that trapped them within the house, forced to relive their sorrow every Christmas Eve. The brass bell," she warned, her voice a raspy whisper, "is the key to the curse. It amplifies their sorrow, their longing. As long as it rings, the curse holds strong." The Harrisons were horrified. They had unwittingly awakened a family's tormented souls. Now they were in danger of becoming part of the ghostly Christmas carol themselves. Armed with this knowledge, the Harrisons returned to the house, determined to break the curse. They searched for clues, for anything that could help them appease the spirits and set them free. In the attic, Emily discovered a hidden compartment in the old chest. Inside lay a beautifully bound diary, its pages filled with elegant script. It belonged to the young girl who had died all those years ago. As Emily read, she learned of the girl's love for music, for her family, and for the Christmas season. She learned of the girl's final wish to hear her family's Christmas carols one last time. The Harrisons knew what they had to do. They gathered around the Christmas tree, the ghostly figures watching them with mournful eyes. Mr. Harrison held the brass bell, its surface cold to the touch. "We understand your pain," he said, his voice trembling but firm. "We want to help you find peace." He looked at Emily. "Emily, sing for them. Sing the carol she loved the most." Emily took a deep breath, her heart pounding in her chest. She closed her eyes, picturing the young girl, and began to sing. Her voice was small at first, but it grew in strength, filled with emotion and a longing for peace. As Emily's voice filled the room, the ghostly figures began to shimmer. Tears streamed down their translucent faces, tears of sorrow and relief. The bell in Mr. Harrison's hand glowed with a soft, warm light. Suddenly a gust of wind whipped through the house, extinguishing the candles and sending a flurry of snow swirling through the air. When the light returned, the ghostly figures were gone. The only sound was Emily's voice, now clear and strong, finishing the carol. The brass bell was warm to the touch, its inscription no longer menacing but filled with a gentle peace. The curse was broken. The Harrisons packed up their belongings and left the Victorian mansion, a place that had been their home for generations. The walls of the old house had witnessed countless family gatherings, celebrations, and even moments of sorrow. But now they were leaving behind the spirits of the family and the memory of the haunting carol that echoed through the halls every Christmas Eve. The mansion, once filled with life, now stood silent and empty, a mere shadow of its former self. They moved to a new town, a new home, filled with light and laughter. The new house was a stark contrast to the old mansion, with its bright rooms and cheerful atmosphere. It was a place where they hoped to create new memories and leave the past behind. But every Christmas Eve, Emily, the youngest of the Harrisons, remembers the mournful song of the ghosts. The eerie melody that once filled the old mansion now played softly in her mind, a haunting reminder of the past. She often found herself reflecting on the lesson she learned in the old house. It was a lesson about the weight of memories and the power they hold over us. She learned that some memories are best left undisturbed, that digging too deep into the past can sometimes unearth things better left forgotten. The old photographs and the dusty books were reminders of a time long gone. The past, she realized, can hold both beauty and sorrow. The old house, with its beautiful architecture and eerie atmosphere, was a testament to that duality. It was a place where joy and sadness coexisted, where the lines between the two often blurred, and that sometimes silence speaks louder than words. The empty rooms of the old mansion, with their echoing silence, seemed to hold 1,000 unspoken stories. As she hangs a simple brass bell on her own Christmas tree, she is reminded of the old house and the family who once lived there. The bell, a symbol of hope and remembrance, holds a special place in her heart. She can't help but whisper a silent prayer for the family who once haunted the old house, hoping that they have found peace. The memories of the past, though haunting, also bring a sense of connection and continuity. A reminder that even in the darkest of times, the spirit of Christmas can offer a flicker of hope and redemption. The soft glow of the Christmas lights in her new home serves as a beacon of light in the darkness. The flickering candlelight, a symbol of warmth and hope, breaks through the darkness, reminding her that the past, with all its beauty and sorrow, is a part of who she is. And that in itself is a silent warning to cherish the present and look forward to the future with hope.
Snow fell softly, silently, blanketing the quaint town of Hollybrook in a pristine white. The air, crisp and cold, carried the sweet melody of carols. It was Christmas Eve, a night of joyous reunions and warm hearths. A lone figure emerged from the swirling snow, pulling a worn suitcase. Amelia, her breath misting in the frosty air, gazed at the familiar sight of Hollybrook. Years had passed since she last walked these snow-dusted streets, her heart heavy with bittersweet memories. The town square, aglow with twinkling lights and adorned with a towering Christmas tree, buzzed with festive cheer. Laughter echoed, children shrieked with delight, and the aroma of roasted chestnuts filled the air. Yet beneath this veneer of merriment, Amelia felt a shiver crawl down her spine. An unsettling stillness seemed to linger in the air, a stark contrast to the exuberant celebrations. As she made her way towards her grandmother's old Victorian house, a sudden gust of wind howled through the narrow lanes. The cheerful carols were momentarily drowned out, replaced by a low, mournful whisper that seemed to emanate from the heart of the blizzard. It was the first sign that this Christmas Eve held something more than festive cheer. The old house stood at the edge of town, shrouded in a veil of swirling snow. Each step Amelia took towards it seemed to echo the growing unease within her. The house, once filled with the warmth of her grandmother's love, now stood cold and imposing. As she stepped inside, the scent of musty furniture and forgotten memories filled her nostrils. Dust motes danced in the pale moonlight, filtering through the frost-etched windows. It was as if time itself had stopped within these walls, holding its breath. The silence was broken only by the creaking floorboards beneath her feet. Every sound seemed amplified, every shadow elongated in the flickering candlelight. A sudden clatter from the attic sent a shiver down her spine. She recalled her grandmother's stories, tales whispered by the fireside of a winter spirit, the frosted whisperer, who haunted the outskirts of Hollybrook. Dismissing them as folklore, Amelia nevertheless felt a knot of dread tighten in her stomach. The wind howled outside, sounding eerily like a mournful cry. Amelia ventured into the attic, her heart pounding with a mix of apprehension and curiosity. Dust lay thick on every surface, shrouding forgotten treasures in a ghostly veil. Her gaze fell upon a wooden chest tucked away in a shadowy corner. As she lifted the heavy lid, a blast of icy air struck her. Nestled amongst the baubles was a small, exquisitely carved figurine. As Amelia reached for the figurine, the wind outside seemed to howl in protest. Fear coiled in her stomach, cold and sharp. Seeking solace and answers, Amelia sought out the oldest resident of Hollybrook, a weathered old woman named Mrs. Hawthorne. She lived alone in a cozy cottage surrounded by the comforting aroma of baking gingerbread. Mrs. Hawthorne listened intently to Amelia's tale, her wrinkled face etched with a mixture of concern and grim acceptance. She knew the legends, had heard the whispers all her life. The frosted whisperer, she explained, was not a mere tale, but a malevolent entity. According to local law, the whisperer was once a woodcarver, consumed by his craft. He had sought to capture the very essence of winter in his work, creating a figurine of unparalleled beauty. But his obsession had driven him to madness, leading him to strike a bargain with dark forces. On Christmas Eve, the whisperer had vanished into a blizzard, his final masterpiece in his arms. Legend had it that he had become one with the winter storm, his spirit forever bound to the figurine. Now, every Christmas Eve, the Whisperer returned, seeking to spread his icy grip over Hollybrook. Amelia listened to Mrs. Hawthorne's tale with a mounting sense of dread. The legend, once dismissed as mere folklore, now held a chilling ring of truth. Every strange occurrence, every whisper of wind, every drop in temperature seemed to point towards the terrifying reality of the frosted Whisperer. The figurine, now resting on the table between them, seemed to pulsate with an unnatural energy. Its frosted surface seemed to shift and swirl, as if alive with the blizzard raging outside. The air grew heavy, charged with anticipation. The cheerful sounds of carols from the town square seemed to fade, replaced by an oppressive silence broken only by the mournful howl of the wind. Amelia realized with a start that the snow had stopped. The storm outside had grown eerily still, as if holding its breath. Her gaze met Mrs. Hawthorne's, both united in their fear and the knowledge that the worst was yet to come. The legend had come alive, and Hollybrook was in grave danger. The warmth of the gingerbread cookies and the festive decorations seemed a distant memory, overshadowed by the impending confrontation with the frosted Whisperer. As darkness descended on Christmas Eve, a palpable tension gripped Hollybrook. The festive lights seemed to dim, their cheer extinguished by the growing sense of dread. The once jovial townsfolk huddled in their homes, fear etched on their faces. Outside, the unnatural stillness was shattered by a sudden violent gust of wind. The temperature plummeted, the air growing heavy with icy particles. It was no ordinary blizzard. This was the Whisperer's fury unleashed upon the town. Panic surged through Amelia. She knew she had to act to protect the town from the malevolent entity that threatened to consume it. Armed with her grandmother's stories and a newfound determination, she devised a plan. "We need to lure him out, to confront him," she declared, her voice trembling but resolute. "The legend says he's drawn to the warmth of Christmas Eve." Mrs. Hawthorne, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and admiration, nodded slowly. Together they would face the storm, hoping to appease the frosted Whisperer and save their beloved town. The fate of Hollybrook rested on their shoulders. Amelia and Mrs. Hawthorne stepped outside into the teeth of the blizzard. The wind howled around them, a symphony of icy fury. The air was thick with swirling snow, making visibility almost impossible. They made their way towards the town square. The Christmas tree stood cloaked in a shroud of ice. The festive decorations hung limp and lifeless. As they reached the square, the wind died down. The snow swirled around a figure standing beneath the frozen Christmas tree. It was the frosted Whisperer, his form radiating an unnatural chill. "You have disturbed me," the Whisperer hissed. "You have meddled with things that should have remained buried." Fear threatened to consume Amelia, but she stood her ground. She held up the figurine, its frosted surface glowing faintly. "We mean you no harm," she said, her voice surprisingly steady. "We only want to help you find peace." The frosted Whisperer regarded Amelia with an unnerving stillness. The air crackled with tension. "Peace?" the Whisperer echoed. "There is no peace for one such as I. I am bound to this form, to this night." "But you were once human," Amelia pressed. "Surely some part of that remains." She stepped closer, extending the figurine. "Take it back," she urged. The Whisperer hesitated, his form flickering. Then he reached out and took the figurine. A look of intense longing crossed his features. The wind softened, the blizzard abating. With a sigh that seemed to carry the weight of centuries, the frosted Whisperer faded from view. The snowdrifts around the town square settled, the blizzard finally subsiding. A fragile peace descended upon Hollybrook. Amelia and Mrs. Hawthorne, their faces pale with exhaustion and relief, watched as the first rays of dawn pierced through the retreating storm clouds. The Christmas lights flickered back to life, casting a warm glow over the snow-covered town. As the townsfolk emerged from their homes, their faces etched with a mixture of relief and bewilderment, Amelia knew that the memory of this night would forever be etched in their hearts. The legend of the frosted Whisperer would continue, a chilling reminder of the power of obsession and the delicate balance between the mundane and the supernatural. Yet, as Amelia gazed at the faint traces of frost that lingered on the figurine, she couldn't shake the feeling that the Whisperer's presence had not been entirely extinguished. A shiver ran down her spine, a whisper of warning that beneath the surface of normalcy shadows still stirred. The threat, though subdued, was not entirely vanquished. It merely lay dormant, awaiting its time to rise again.